a man received an impossible order, an order that made no sense to soldiers, an order that sounded absurd to warriors, an order that, by every human strategy, should have ended in complete failure. He was told to bring down an entire city, without using weapons, without launching an attack, without destroying its gates. No siege machines, no ladders, no battering rams, no army storming the walls. The strategy was simply this: walk around the city. Just walk, day after day, around massive stone walls guarded by soldiers, around towers built for war, around a city that had never been conquered. It sounded like madness, but that strategy would destroy one of the most fortified cities of the ancient world. And the man who received that order would become one of the most legendary leaders in history. His name was Joshua, the leader who saw rivers open before his eyes, the leader who watched impossible walls collapse, the leader who once prayed, and the sun stopped in the sky. But to understand how any of this happened, we must go back in time, back to a moment when an entire nation was standing at the edge of destiny. For 40 long years, the people of Israel had wandered through the wilderness, 40 years under the scorching desert sun, 40 years walking through dry lands, rocky valleys, and endless sand. They were no longer slaves. Years earlier, they had been freed from the most powerful empire in the world, Egypt, and the man who had led them to freedom was Moses. Moses had faced Pharaoh. Moses had stretched out his staff over the Red Sea. Moses had watched the waters split apart as an entire nation crossed on dry ground. He had guided them through the wilderness. He had received the commandments of God on Mount Sinai. He had spoken with God in ways no other leader had ever experienced. But there was one thing Moses would never see: the Promised Land, the land that had been promised to their ancestors, the land flowing with milk and honey, a land where the people of Israel would finally settle. Just before reaching that land, Moses died, and suddenly the entire nation faced an uncertain future. Thousands of families, thousands of warriors, children, elders, an entire people standing at the edge of a promise. And one question echoed across the campfires of Israel: who will lead us now? Who will guide us into the land? Who will face the battles ahead? Then God chose a man, not the most famous man, not the most powerful, but a man who had spent years quietly learning. His name was Joshua. For many years, Joshua had served as Moses' assistant. He had watched closely. He had listened carefully. He had learned what it meant to trust God even when circumstances seemed impossible. Joshua had already proven himself in battle. Years earlier, he had led Israel's army against enemies in the wilderness. But leadership over an entire nation was different. Now the responsibility was enormous. He would have to lead an entire people into a land filled with fortified cities, cities defended by experienced armies, cities protected by towering walls, cities that had never fallen. But Joshua would not face this challenge alone. One day God spoke directly to him, and the message was clear: Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land which I am giving to them. Then God gave Joshua a promise that would define his entire leadership. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Those words became the foundation of Joshua's courage. But before any city could be conquered, before any battle could be fought, an enormous obstacle stood in their way: the Jordan River. At that time of the year, the river was overflowing. Its waters were fast, deep, dangerous. Crossing it with thousands of people was impossible. There were no bridges, no boats, no safe passage. And yet, this river stood between Israel and the Promised Land. But God gave Joshua surprising instruction. The priests were to carry the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred chest that represented God's presence among the people. And they were to walk directly toward the river. The moment their feet touched the water, something extraordinary would happen. The entire nation gathered near the riverbank. Men, women, children, thousands watching in silence. The priest began walking forward, step by step, closer to the rushing waters. Every step required faith, because nothing had changed yet. The river was still flowing, the current was still strong, the waters were still dangerous. Then the priest stepped into the river, and at that very moment, the impossible happened. The waters of the Jordan stopped flowing. Upstream, the river began to pile up like a wall. Downstream, the riverbed emptied. The powerful current disappeared. The ground beneath the water became dry. An entire river had been stopped, and the people of Israel crossed over on dry ground. Families walked across. Animals crossed safely. Children ran across the riverbed. It was another miracle, just like the Red Sea years earlier. And it was a sign that the same God who had guided Moses was now guiding Joshua. But crossing the Jordan was only the beginning, because soon another challenge stood before them, a challenge that seemed even more impossible. The city of Jericho. Jericho was not an ordinary city. It was a fortress, one of the most heavily fortified cities of the ancient world. Its walls were enormous, massive layers of stone built for defense. Some historians believe the walls were so wide that chariots had traveled along the top. Guard towers rose above the city. Soldiers patrolled the gates. No army could simply walk in. Attacking Jericho directly would have been a disaster. But God had a completely different plan. A plan that no military strategist would ever design. God gave Joshua command. For 6 days, the army of Israel would march around the city. Once each day, they would not attack. They would not shout. They would not threaten the city. They would simply walk. The priests would walk ahead carrying trumpets, and the Ark of the Covenant would remain in the center of the procession. The first day arrived. The army marched around the city. Soldiers on the walls watched with confusion. No attack came. No battle began. The Israelites simply walked and left. The second day came. Once again, the army marched around Jericho. Still no attack. Still no battle. Just silence. The third day came. Then the fourth. Then the fifth. Then the sixth. And for 6 days, nothing happened. The walls remained standing. The city remained strong. But the seventh day was different. Joshua gave new instructions. This time the army would march around the city 7 times. The people began walking. The tension was growing. 1 circle, 2 circles, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then the priests blew their trumpets. The sound echoed through the valley. Joshua raised his voice. Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. And the entire nation shouted. Thousands of voices. A thunder sound rising toward the sky. And suddenly, the ground began to shake. The massive walls of Jericho trembled. Stone blocks shifted. Dust filled the air. Then the impossible happened. The walls collapsed, not partially, not slowly. The entire defensive wall fell. The city was exposed. Israel rushed forward, and Jericho was conquered. But the greatest miracle in Joshua's life was still ahead. During one of the greatest battles of Israel's early history, Joshua faced an alliance of powerful kings. The battle was intense. Victory was close, but the sun was beginning to set. If night arrived, the enemy armies could escape. Joshua did something no commander had ever dared to do. He prayed, and then he spoke aloud before the entire nation. Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon over the valley of Ajalon. And something extraordinary happened. The sun stopped moving across the sky. Daylight remained. The battle continued. Israel pressed forward, and the enemy armies were defeated. Years passed. Joshua continued leading the nation. City after city was conquered. The land was divided among the tribes of Israel. Families settled. Fields were planted. Homes were built. The long journey from Egypt had finally reached its destination. Joshua had become an old man. His hair had turned white. His body carried the weight of many years. Knowing his life was coming to an end, he gathered the people of Israel one final time. He reminded them of their history. their deliverance from slavery, their journey through the wilderness, the miracles they had witnessed, the battles they had won. Then Joshua gave them a challenge that would echo through generations. Choose this day whom you will serve. And then he declared one of the most famous statements in biblical history. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Joshua died at the age of 110, but his story never faded because it reminds us of something powerful. When someone chooses to trust God, rivers can open, walls can fall, and even the sun can stand still in the sky